The Mind-Controlled State by Philip Jones. 1068. Added to this was the presence of an on-site local cultural phenomenon, the jantelov. In Denmark, the plotters and planners realized that the foundations of mass mind control had been in place for at least a century or so, in the form of the unwritten code known as the jantelov. The Jant law is the Nordic version of the tall puppy syndrome. It was named and described by the Danish author Axel Sandemos in his novel A Fugitive Crosses His Tracks circa 1933, where he writes about the small fictional northern town of Jant, which is modeled upon and typical of all small Danish, and probably Norwegian and Swedish, communities at the beginning of the 20th century, where anonymity is impossible. There are 10 basic tenets in this law, but they are all variations on this one single theme. Don't think you're anyone special or that you're better than us. Those who do not keep to this law and behave in accordance with it, are regarded with suspicion and hostility. Sandemos added an 11th rule, which he formulated as a question. Do you think I don't know anything about you? This is the implied threat of censure, that others in the community will know something about those who dare to transgress, which can be later used against them. The rules are not only applied outwardly, Danes apply them equally and instinctively towards themselves. This means that the rules of this Jant law create a state of arrested individuality where one does not wish nor dare to be either too high above or too far below others socially and economically. With this rather pernicious and degrading subculture already in place, it was no coincidence and also somewhat convenient, for the conspirators that is, that the social engineers and their Illuminati backers and bankers decided upon Denmark and the other Nordic countries as the location of what can only be termed a mass mind control experiment. Education. Education is one of the holy cows of the Danish welfare system, and it took me a while to work out how and why a state would finance and support the continued educating of not only the very gifted far into their 20s, but as experience as a guest lecturer at Odense University in the 1990s showed me, the quite average also. Furthermore, the push and shove technique used to drag adult people back into education via the VUC program similarly mystified me. What was it all about? Social equality? I don't think so. The introduction of state-controlled education whether in Denmark or elsewhere in the West was not, nor is at the controlling level, intended to educate at all. The last thing a dictator wants is a truly educated, independent-minded and intelligent population. It was, and is, the means to universally indoctrinate a lifelong sense of reality which conforms to that model desired by the state and hidden manipulators. For their intended society, the Danish planners required a type of person that, thinking collectively and suppressing his individuality in favor of the group, is technologically orientated, and socially well-adjusted. To this end, the educational system was profoundly altered during the 1950s and 1960s. From imparting knowledge, its aim was changed to that of guiding social behavior. As Alistair Crowley correctly intimated, if the state education ruse was to be successful, it would need to be aimed at children of a young and suggestible age. In Brave New World written in the early 1930s, Huxley described a society of total control in which children were brought up in communal nurseries, conditioned from birth to accept what the state told them to do. Like laboratory rats, children were electroshocked if they did anything unacceptable to the programming. One scene has babies crawling towards pictures of flowers and birds only to be shocked because the state didn't want them to like nature. A form of this is going on right across society today as people are punished through various means for not acting in ways acceptable to the state and rewarded when they play the game as demanded. The children in Brave New World are brainwashed even when they sleep with subliminal messages turning them into insatiable consumers to drive the engine of industrial production, as indeed they are in only slightly more subtle ways today. At the heart of this child control was to remove children from the influence of their parents. In the UK and increasingly mirrored elsewhere throughout the EU, it is the plan to impose rules on the teaching of social and group interaction skills to 3-year-olds. This has the Orwellian Huxleyan title of the early years foundation stage. This is the most overt and blatant example yet of the state removing a child at the earliest practicable age from its parents' influence in order to indoctrinate it, whilst still at its most impressionable stage of development. In Denmark, the routine farming out of infants by working parents has been practiced for the past 3 decades at least, in the form of the vuggestue and kindergartens. Every morning across Denmark, thousands of parents unwittingly and voluntarily deliver up their innocence into the hands of the state. Wherever you look across the EU, this program of early indoctrination can be seen to either be in place, or about to be installed. Whereas, for example, in the UK, this brainwashing for beginners is still in its literal infancy. In Denmark and the other Nordic lands, it is an accepted part of the culture. Aleister Crowley, the arch-Satanist, Freemason and British spy, put it this way: "Get them by 8, or it's too late." This is the point. The earlier the process starts, the more effective and consolidated the effects will be. Enter the early years foundation stage and its teaching of communication, language and literacy to infants, together with knowledge and understanding of the world. The play years of such children is vital to their balanced development because it awakens their right brain, the creative and artistic aspects of themselves. The right brain improvises and goes with the moment, while the left brain wants structure and systems. All around us, we see structure and systems. Coincidence? In his book, The New Totalitarians, the author Roland Huntford, when writing about the Swedish educational model, explained, "Education is one of the most important agents for changing society. It has been integrated into the scheme for change, and its purpose is to turn out the correct kind of person for the new society. The new school rejects individuality, and teaches children to collaborate with others. It rejects competition, and teaches cooperation. Children are taught to work in groups. They solve problems together, not alone. The basic idea is that they are considered primarily as members of society, and individuality is discouraged. They want to produce people who are integrated into society. It aims to produce a well-adjusted, good member of society. It teaches people to respect the consensus, and not sabotage it. In the schools, the emphasis lies heavily on the collective. In other words, the aim is to produce human robots who look, think and act alike and in conformity to the required social norms, and refrain entirely from questioning and or challenging the regime. To this end, in Denmark, the program has been entirely successful, as any form of individuality or eccentricity is not only discouraged but becomes the object of a silent threat of ostracism by one's fellows. This causes a certain level of brain drain as the more individual and exceptional, unable to function as they would wish in Denmark, find other lands in which they can do so. Worse still, when one considers the comprehensive social security net, is the surprising level of suicide, not only in Denmark, but throughout the northern lands. Not surprisingly, many of those resorting to this tragic form of escape are the very gifted, individualistic and eccentric. In Denmark, as well as most if not all other Western nations, we are witnessing a relentless centralization of all aspects of society, and state education is no exception. This move towards the center is considered vital where the indoctrination of children is concerned. He who thinks the same can be controlled the same. One blueprint, one mind, one reality. 100% Dansk. The Danish mass media as agents of conformity. In the post-war years, the thinkers of the Frankfurt School, now established in America, were recruited by the OSS, foreigners of the CIA, and organized by British intelligence in connection with the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, the premier Illuminati front for global mind control both then and now. Theodore Adorno, a music professor and senior member of the Frankfurt School, was commissioned to research the effects of manipulated radio, television, popular music, movies and advertising on the US population. The findings of this project and the application of the results are primarily responsible for the massively damaged collective psyche of people living in Western societies and the mind-washing of children whose parents have abdicated responsibility for their raising to a conspiratorial state together with a screen in the corner of the living room. If one takes one's impression of Denmark solely by viewing its mass media, the country appears to all intents and purposes to be run by a tolerant dictatorship. Press, radio and TV show a remarkable similarity, as if guided by some ministry of propaganda. Criticism of the government there may be, but it is almost exclusively confined to administrative trivialities, and covered by the formula: first you decide on your goals, and then you discuss the means. There is no other discussion. Almost never is there questioning of political fundamentals, or critical examination of the institutions of the state. All the media seem to be of one mind, advocating the same consensus, professing the same slogans, always, it seems, following the convolution of some party line. They give the impression of existing, not to question authority, but to avoid disturbing the public peace of mind, not to criticize, but to indoctrinate with a certain point of view. In Denmark, blind belief in the state has allowed unrivaled possibilities in the programming of the population through sophisticated and some not so sophisticated means. One of the more obvious and least sophisticated of these is the universal and propagandized message that Danish is best, coupled with a peculiarly localized form of nationalism which is currently being exacerbated by the Danish People's Party and its open hostility to all non-Danes, which now borders on the xenophobic. This hive mentality is inculcated via a corporate media mafia in collusion with the state, and run overwhelmingly by bilderbergers like Marit Eldrup and Flemming Rose of the Politik and Jyllandsposten group of newspapers, responsible for the mass hysteria caused by their now infamous and outrageous drawings of the Prophet Muhammad. Saw in itself this calculated ruse to further alienate the Danish people from their Muslim immigrants, was in itself pure mass mind control and manipulation. It achieved all its aims and more. It consolidated the already marked siege mentality in the host population. It exacerbated the feelings of being unwanted guests in the country in the Muslim diaspora, and inflamed Western Islamic relations around the globe, causing massive and sometimes violent anti-West demonstrations in the Muslim world, thereby giving credence to the ever more bogus US-led war on terror. In effect, the cartoons were a mind control coup on the Danish population in particular and the world in general.